Today's video is on anaerobic respiration. So let's start with an overview. So aerobic respiration is in the presence of oxygen, whereas anaerobic respiration is in the absence of oxygen. So we're going to be looking at respiration in the absence of oxygen today. So aerobic, as you can see, has many more steps than anaerobic respiration. So aerobic respiration has the link reaction, Krebs cycle, and oxidative phosphorylation, whereas anaerobic respiration after glycolysis just has fermentation. So both aerobic and anaerobic respiration are done to generate ATP, and this ATP is to release energy so we can perform our bodily processes, we can move, etc. So anaerobic respiration, as you can see, depends on glycolysis. Because it doesn't have all of these other processes, it purely depends on glycolysis. So what's the problem with anaerobic respiration? Why isn't it our main form of respiration? Why do our bodies choose to use aerobic respiration? So aerobic respiration, as you can see by these diagrams, has many NAD and FAD, and these NAD and FAD coenzymes are reduced. They're reduced to form reduced NAD and reduced FAD. So this means that they gain hydrogen. And these coenzymes gain this hydrogen, they become reduced, so that in oxidative phosphorylation they can donate electrons to the electron transport chain. And if you don't understand any of this, you can just go back to my other videos on the stages in aerobic respiration. But because these coenzymes have gained this hydrogen, they're donating these electrons to the electron transport chain. And at the end of the electron transport chain, oxygen acts as the final acceptor of these electrons. But if this oxygen is not present because we're in the absence of oxygen, the electron transport chain will stop because there'll be a clog up of electrons. There will be no oxidation, reduction, passing on of the electrons because it will all be clogged up. So the electron transport chain will stop. And if the electron transport chain stops, this means that reduced FAD and reduced NAD will not get oxidized back to their original states of FAD and NAD. And if this NAD and FAD are not present, this means that glycolysis cannot occur because they cannot get reduced, they cannot gain this hydrogen to allow this entire aerobic respiration to continue. So basically, without oxygen being the final acceptor, the entirety of the aerobic respiration process cannot work. So how does anaerobic respiration overcome this? How does it overcome not having oxygen as a final acceptor? Well, we have glycolysis occurring normally, so you can see here is the process of glycolysis. And so we're reducing NAD and producing ATP. So you can see that here. We're reducing our NAD to reduced NAD and we're producing ATP. And we're forming two pyruvate molecules just like in aerobic respiration. So after this, our pyruvate molecules that we have just produced, we are going to reduce them again. So they're going to take the hydrogens that the reduced NAD have just taken and they're going to form other products. But this allows our reduced NAD to be oxidized again to our NAD. And as we have oxidized to NAD, we can continue glycolysis in this cycle. So our pyruvate will take the hydrogens that our reduced NAD have to allow NAD to reform and continue the process. And so in anaerobic respiration, the energy that is produced is based on only the ATP formed in glycolysis. So we form ATP in glycolysis and we reduce our NAD, but then our reduced NAD is oxidized again by our pyruvate. So First, we're going to have a look at the production of lactate in animals. So, anaerobic respiration is a survival benefit, as we can survive temporary shortages of oxygen. And this can be used in strenuous exercise, so when our oxygen supply doesn't match the demand, and this is important for survival. For example, a prey trying to outrun a predator. It may not have enough oxygen to supply this sprinting, but the body can survive this temporary shortage of oxygen to try outrun this predator and survive. So as we can see, we have produced 2 pyruvate molecules after our normal glycolysis process of producing ATP and reducing our NAD. And our pyruvate molecules that we have produced take 2 hydrogens from our reduced NAD. So this oxidizes our reduced NAD back into NAD. And as the pyruvate takes 2 hydrogens, it now forms lactate. So we have taken our pyruvate, we've taken then 2 hydrogens from our reduced NAD to form a lactate, and our original NAD to further glycolysis. So once oxygen is available again, the lactate that we have produced by reducing our pyruvate can then be used to oxidize our lactate back into pyruvate. So once oxygen is available, we can oxidize our lactate back into pyruvate. So this pyruvate can then be further oxidized to release energy, or it can be converted into glycogen, and this is a form of energy storage. So why do we need to oxidize our lactate back into pyruvate? Well, it's because lactate causes cramp and muscle fatigue if left in the muscle tissue for too long. And this is because lactate is an acid, and this means that it changes the pH. It makes it more acidic. It lowers the pH. And pH changes affect our enzymes, and enzymes are very important in pretty much all of our bodily processes. So our muscles have some tolerance to lactate, but it still needs to be removed by the blood. So we need to take out this lactate. It needs to be taken to the liver and converted into glycogen so it doesn't continue to affect our enzymes. So now moving on to the production of ethanol in plants and microorganisms. So in microorganisms like bacteria and fungi and some plant cells, and these plant cells could be root hair cells in waterlogged conditions so they don't have oxygen available, something different occurs. So each pyruvate molecule that we've produced, so we've done our normal glycolysis and we've produced our 2 molecules of pyruvate, our ATP and our reduced NAD, and each of our 2 pyruvate molecules, instead of just gaining 2 hydrogens like in our other process of aerobic respiration, the pyruvate molecules actually lose a molecule of carbon dioxide and accept hydrogen from the reduced NAD. And this is to produce ethanol. So our pyruvate molecule takes a hydrogen from our reduced NAD, reoxidizing it into NAD to further glycolysis. But it also, our pyruvate, as well as gaining a hydrogen, loses a molecule of carbon dioxide. So we're gaining a carbon dioxide molecule and an ethanol molecule from our pyruvate, gaining this hydrogen and losing the carbon dioxide. So we produce ethanol, carbon dioxide, and our original NAD to further glycolysis. So this form of aerobic respiration is exploited by the brewing industry in yeast. So yeast is specifically grown in aerobic conditions so it can perform this process and produce ethanol and carbon dioxide. So they want to ferment carbohydrates in plants because they want to produce products like fermenting grapes to get wine and barley seeds to get beer for ethanol.